This is Doug Stout. It's February 26, 2014. I'm here with Ray Bauer, who was in Vietnam in the soccer war. Ray, where are you from?
Norton, Kansas.
And you were born there, and
Born and raised in Norton, Kansas.
what'd your folks do?
My father was a barber and my mother's a school teacher.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you the only child, or?
No, I have an older brother who was in the service during the Korean War.
Okay. Is that what made you decide to go into Vietnam or the service?
No, I went to college at the University of Kansas on a football scholarship. And I was 17 years old. And the Korean War was going on. This is in 1951. The Korean War was on. I wasn't old enough to be drafted, and the football coach thought we ought to get into ROTC. And maybe we wouldn't be drafted till we got our college degree. And that way we'd be there to play football. Right. I don't know that he was real worried about us getting a college degree, but I think he was. And so I got an ROTC. And as I advanced through the ROTC program, the Air Force ROTC program, they asked if I'd like to try to be a pilot, and I just couldn't believe that they would do that. And I said, yeah. And they gave me a test, and they said, well, you seem to have the abilities. We'll send you to pilot training. So I said, yeah. And lo and behold, I went to pilot training and got my wings, and I couldn't believe it. They let a little old boy from Norton, Kansas, fly $1 million airplane around the world. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time in the military.
What position were you playing in football?
Well, I went there as an offensive tackle, and then I played center 1 year, lettered 2 years as a tackle, and 1 year as a center. And we were not very good.
Okay.
Nothing like Kansas's basketball.
All right. So when did your active duty start?
Well, I was commissioned on June 4th, 1956 in the reserves, and I started active duty on, I think it was September the 26th, 1956.
Okay.
Went to Lackland Air Force Base and checked in. And we awaited assignment to where you were going to go to pilot training. And I was there till mid-October and went to Marana Air Base in Arizona, just outside of Tucson, where they now hold a big pro golf tournament. It wasn't like it wasn't like that when I was there. I mean, it was a good assignment. I mean, if you were told you were going to fly, then you better be prepared to go fly. And so I went through primary pilot training there, through the T-34 and the T-28, and then completed that and went to multi-engine at Reese Air Force Base in Lubbock, Texas, and completed that. And at the end of, as we were getting ready to get our pilot's wings, the Air Force kind of changed the rules. You thought you were going to get a flying assignment if you got your wings, and they changed the rules and said, well, if you'll sign on for another year or two or whatever, we will give you a flying assignment. And I didn't want to do that. Going through pilot training was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And I mean, it was really, time pressure was the biggest thing. Our instructors kept saying, we can teach anybody to fly if we got enough time, but you can only have so many tries, and if you can't do it, you can't do it, and you're done.
Right.
So the pressure was, and it, purposely that way, because of the profession it was. If you're going to go to war, I mean, you can't control time. So,
right.
And so I didn't get a flying assignment, and from there I went to Florida, Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida, to a ACNW school, which is Aircraft Control and Warning. And went to Germany from there, Rothwestern Air Base outside of Kassel, Germany, in the ACNW squadron. And our job there was to, there are 3 flight corridors from West Berlin, or West Germany, into Berlin. And it was over East Germany's airspace, and you had to stay within these flight corridors, and we would direct them on, like air traffic controllers,
Right.
on make sure the airplane stayed in those corridors going in and out of Berlin. And then I still got to fly some, but not a lot. I flew the C-47 while I was there, and the L-20. And they closed down that site and sent us different places. And I ended up at a place called Giebelstadt Air Base in Germany, near Würzburg, Germany. And I actually was sent there to play football.
Really?
Yeah. We had in those days, they had football teams in the military.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I went off to pilot training, I was told if I voiced out of pilot training, I would be sent to Hamilton Air Force Base in California to play football, which lots of guys that had played sports in college.
Yeah.
And our division had a basketball team, and we had the football team at Giebelstadt, and they had a track team, and I mean it was good.
Right.
And all the troops liked that. They were behind the teams. We were quite successful. At the end of our second season, I think it was, May of the first, I don't remember. I only did it 2 years. 1 year I played a lot and helped coach, and the next year I coached mostly the line. We played in Madrid, Spain, another military team, in the big soccer stadium there, where Real Madrid plays.
Mm-hmm.
We played before the largest crowd ever to see an American football game at that time.
Right.
Now they got bigger stadiums in the States
Sure.
now. I think it was 105,000, and we were presented to President Franco, General Franco, and we won the game. That was good too. So
Right.
that was and after I finished that assignment, well, I stayed there. I don't know. I was going to get out of the service, and they put a thing up called the Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
And they said, you can go home, or you can stay here and keep doing your job, but you're not going to get out, because we don't know what the situation is going to be. So I had a fiance, and she said, well, if you're not coming home and getting married, forget it. So I came back to the States, we got married, and I took her back. We had a 2.5-year honeymoon in Germany, and it was great. I'm being a little silly. She didn't really put it that
Right.
way, but we had planned to marry when I came back. And part of the problem, even if I could have come back and get out, I couldn't find a job till I came back to the States. They would say, "You come back, we'll talk to you," but I couldn't come back for interviews. So anyway, we went from Giebelstadt, then I went to Hamilton Air Force Base as a C-123 pilot. And I spent 4 years there, 1 year of which I went to college, back to college at Golden Gate College. It's now Golden Gate University. And got my master's degree. And then I flew, I don't know, about 2,500 hours in the 123, and of course now Vietnam is gearing up. This is 1966, and we'd send a bunch of guys from our outfit to Vietnam. I knew the time was coming, I would probably go, but I graduated and went right back to work where I was, and then about 3 weeks later I got orders to go to Vietnam, but not to fly the C-123. They said I'd be flying a U-10, which nobody had ever heard of.
Right.
And I got a Popular Mechanics magazine and found out it was called a helio courier in civilian jargon, and it was a short field takeoff and landing airplane. And it's used a lot, well, I don't know about now, but Alaska, they had a lot of civilians, had a lot of them up to the Bush pilots, because they could take it in and out of little bitty places, and they put big balloon tires on it, and it would land and take off on about any terrain. It's a pretty good little airplane. Of course, we overloaded it with loudspeakers and leaflets and all kinds of things.
Did you know when you looked up what type of plane it was, that that then the leaflets and the loudspeakers were going to be put on that, and that's what you were going to do with it, or?
No, I had really no idea until I got to training. I left California. Well, I was assigned to go to Hobart Field in Florida to learn to fly the airplane,
Right.
and learn about the mission. But prior to doing that, I went to survival school, which is required before you went to war at Stead Air Force Base. They no longer have it there, we did that. I think it was about a month. That was a lot of fun. And then to Hurlburt, and there's where I learned that, it was psychological warfare was what they used these for.
Okay.
That we threw out leaflets, we played loudspeakers with messages about how to give up and that sort of thing. And I was there, I don't know how long. Not real long. We got about 50 hours in the airplane, and it was time to go. And then from there, I went to the Philippines for another survival school, and then to Vietnam.
Okay.
And I was in Vietnam from, I don't know, May of '66, I think it was, to April of '67.
Okay.
And all the time was spent flying the U-10, doing psychological warfare, throwing leaflets out and playing loudspeakers, and we did it almost every day. Our detachment was at Benoit, outside of Saigon, and the normal routine was to fly for 4 days, have a day off, fly for 5 days, have a day off, doing nothing, and usually the day you did nothing, you flew as the leaflet thrower with some other pilot. I mean, what do you do when you're at war?
Right.
Go watch haircuts, I guess. I don't know. But and then the next day you were in the office looking at what missions were going to be flown if we knew, and then the next day you'd start flying again. And I flew 484 combat missions, never fired a shot because we were unarmed, and we didn't fly any of those missions above 3,000 feet. So.
Did you have any weapons on board? Did you
Well, yeah, we were. Air Force regulations said you're supposed to take your M16 and your 38, and I had a big machete in case I went down in the jungle. When I turned my weapons in after my tour there, the security police people were not happy because I'd never fired it and I'd never cleaned it. And they were upset with me. But I figured, if I get shot down, I'm all alone. Am I going to fight the war all by myself? No. And I'd probably be more successful trying to stay alive. But I was fortunate. I didn't get shot down, and I tried to be very careful. But it was, I'm going to say this because it's my interview, but it was discouraging, even in those early years, that we weren't trying to win a war. We were just kind of pacifying and doing something would come up and we do things. And I feel now that we should have learned some lessons because we're doing a lot of the same stuff in Afghanistan and Iraq and So, I mean, I can tell the tale about we gave cornmeal to the Vietnamese civilians to help them, and their steady diet is rice. It doesn't make sense. And I even had to fly missions of throwing leaflets out that had cornbread recipes on them to teach the Vietnamese how to use it, and they just fed it to the pigs, and boy, did they have good pigs. But it's and so what do we do when we go into Kuwait or Iraq or somewhere? We throw out ready-to-eat meals with peanut butter. They don't eat that stuff. Yeah. Anyway, don't get me started. Okay. I just, and from Vietnam, like I say, I was there, I can tell you, 354 days. And I had the calendar that you mark the days off and all those things. I did all of one nice thing that sometimes I lose sight of. While I was there, I did have the opportunity to take R&R, rest and relaxing. And I got to go to Hong Kong, and that was a nice experience. And I went to Thailand, to Bangkok. I doubt that it was anywhere near that. I know it isn't like it was then, but those people were very, very friendly. It was a really neat place to be, and it was good to get away from the war, because the whole time I was in Vietnam, I didn't ever go off. I never went into Saigon for anything. I just didn't want to take the chance to get a grenade going off in some bar while I was drinking a beer. If I wanted to drink a beer, I could do it on the base. And I did have the good fortune of getting to go to a Bob Hope Christmas show at one of the army posts that was close by. And
who was with him? Do you remember?
Joy Hetherington.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. Jerry Colonna was with him.
Okay.
And of course Les Brown and his band. They had some Korean gals that were really good, and they were famous. They made records.
Right.
I can't remember who, the Kim sisters or something, but it was really great. And then another great experience. It's a terrible to have to go to war to have some of these experiences, but I got to go to Billy Graham came with his group of evangelists, and enjoyed very much hearing him. And George Beverly Shea sang, and that was a really moving time, and that people cared. So,
Right.
but
You were telling me some of the pamphlets, some of the different things the pamphlets had on them. One was, and I'm not going to try to even say what the camps were called. It was to try to get them to go to a camp.
yeah, we had safe conduct passes was one of the big things, and you threw these things out, and it told them how to surrender. Then once they surrendered, they were put in what they called Chu Hoi villages. Don't ask me why that means something in Vietnam. I don't know. And the Vietnamese government, along with aid, I'm sure, from the U.S. I wasn't in that high arc to know what was, but they were taken care of, and they were given some money to live on, and a wristwatch, and a little place to live, which probably, well, it was nicer than what a lot of these villagers ever lived in, but they didn't know what to do with it. They did not understand indoor plumbing and all those kinds of things, and so it was a real. And I'm sure that a lot of them that gave up went back. They wanted to go back to their same life, and as long as they didn't have to fight with the Viet Cong, they were fine. But if the push came to shove, then they would fight with them.
Right.
And that it makes sense. Again, I don't think we tried to win the war. I think we just tried to settle some arguments, and it didn't work.
Right.
So anyway, when I'm trying to think of some other things that I did, or our unit, they called us litter bugs and everything else because we plastered the country with paper, and we worked very closely with we were air commandos, which I'm very proud of, the fact that I was in the air commandos, and we worked very closely with the special forces. Some really, our Army troops, I'll tell this, it might as well be in this interview. There was a Tay Ninh, was up close to the Cambodian border, and they had a special forces camp there, and we would fly in, and every time I flew into places, if I knew in advance while I was at Benoit, a lot of times you went out somewhere and then they briefed you on your mission, but if you knew you were going, I'd always try to go to the Class 6 store in the BX and get as many cigarettes and as much booze as I could get and take out to these guys, because they didn't have BXs and things like that. And I would take them and give them to them. And so at Tay Ninh, these guys were kind of special to me. I would try to get up there as much as I could. They were always very, very friendly and always wanted me to spend the night with them. And no way was I going to do that. But I flew up and gave them a bunch of stuff, and I told them, I said, this is probably my last mission in here. I said, I haven't because they never told us when you were not going to fly again before you went home.
Right.
But I don't know whether they thought we'd be overcautious or what. But I tried to be as overcautious as I could be every time I went. But I told them I probably wouldn't be back and that I wanted them to stay safe and all this. And they said, well, hey, we got a minute? We got to get out of here? And I said, no, why? What do you got in mind? I said, we'll be right back. Well, they had their tents and stuff not a block or half a block from the runway. And pretty soon here I come back and he had a green beret and gave it to me and said, you're now an honorary green beret.
Wow.
And I'm pretty proud of that.
Oh, I bet.
And it came close to fit.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little tight, but I've still got it.
Right.
And I'm very proud of it. That I mean, that was the camaraderie. It didn't make any difference what service you were in. And I see that now, and well, all of it, and it's probably been that way. True, it's whoever you're with, you try to take care of each other and do the best you can for them. So. I don't know. I was trying to think of any other experiences.
Well, you were talking a little bit. I mean, how did you deal with the boredom? I mean, because you said if you're not flying, all you can do is sit, watch haircuts, and you told me.
I'm fortunate in that I like to read.
Right.
So my wife sent me pocketbooks, paperbacks. The USO. God bless them, had like libraries, but they didn't expect you to bring them back if you lost them in the field, you lost them. And so I always had a paper. So I read a lot when I'd go out to fly a mission and somebody didn't show up to brief me. I would sit down under the wing of the airplane and read. And when I was back at the home base, I did a lot of sitting in the sun. I came back with a tan that was unreal, but there's we did drink a little, or maybe a lot, but they had a movie house. I didn't go to the movies. I don't know why. I don't recall going to the movies. We always fought over. We only got so many Stars and Stripes papers, and we didn't physically fight. But whoever got the paper first when it showed up got to do the crossword puzzle. And so I mean. Lots of cards are played. I don't gamble. Never. Right. My father, years ago, broke me a gambling right quick, and so I didn't. So wrote letters. I just worked.
Right.
As I said, I'd go fly with the other guys if it was my day off, and that was not frowned upon. Most of the guys like that because if anything happened to you, maybe the other guy could bring you home.
Right.
I mean, it was so, but.
And you got the Distinguished Flying Cross in Vietnam.
Yes, that was presented to me when I was in Panama, but I earned the Distinguished Flying Cross in Vietnam. I'm proud of that, and yes, I've got, I don't know, 6 air medals, something like that, or maybe it's more. The first one. Maybe the first 2 I'm pretty proud, but it got to be, and this is not that I'm not proud of all of it, but if you flew the missions, you got the medals after so many. Mm-hmm. And sometimes some of those missions were really pretty simple and easy and not real dangerous.
Right.
Well, I guess they're all dangerous because they were shooting real bullets, but it was just some of it was, I don't know, this may or may not be of interest. There was, I can't think of names, but there was a Special Forces camp that we would go into, and where we landed was it was a road that they'd widened, and so you would come down and kind of buzz if somebody's on one of their 3-wheel bicycles down or whatever, get them off the road so you could come land. And of course that way the Special Forces knew you were coming in, and they would try to help you with that. But flying an airplane, there's no way, unless it's a helicopter, I guess, you got to have a final approach. Mm-hmm. There's just no way around it.
Right.
You can do all kinds of didos getting there, but you got to have a final approach. And on final approach, you'd come into this place, and you could hear the rounds going by. And it's not really like in the movies. It's more of a pinging sound. And you'd come down. So one day I flew in there, and I got a hold of this Special Forces Master Sergeant. I said, "Sir, you got this sniper out there, and every time I come in here, you can hear the rounds going around." And I said, "I get out, I look at my airplane, there's no holes." But and he said, "That's what I was going to ask you. You ever been hit?" And I said, "No." I said, "If any of your other guys been hit?" "Not that I know of." He said, "That's why we haven't gone to get him." He said, "If he put somebody out there who's a better shot." And I thought, yeah, the GI. He told, seriously.
The logic.
Yeah,
Yes.
it makes sense.
Well, yeah.
This guy was or maybe he didn't want to hit you,
Right.
but he was shooting, so they would think he was trying to do his job.
Yeah.
So you never know. But that was kind of one of the lighter moments, and I was fortunate I didn't have but one tour. I felt in Vietnam.
Because after Vietnam, you
Went to Panama
Okay.
to another Air Commando outfit. I was in the 5th Air Commandos in Vietnam, and the 605th Air Commandos in Panama, and that I still was flying a U-10. Only our mission changed somewhat there in that we worked with Special Forces there, and we worked with the pilots that were there flying a U-10 that knew that hadn't been to Vietnam,
Okay.
and showed them how we did this and that. But we did lots of what they called civic action. There may be some civilian that had appendicitis out in the Tule weeds. The only thing you could get in there to get them was and we'd go pick them up, or we'd fly a doctor into them,
Right.
whatever. And we did a lot of that for the civilian community. We also did counterinsurgency training with different countries. Each pilot had a country assigned to them in Central and South America that if that country asked for training, they were to know about this country, know the customs and that sort of thing, so that they could get along fairly well, and they would go there and do whatever kind of training was needed. While I was there, I got to go to El Salvador to train. I went to Nicaragua and did a little training. Mainly it was kind of boondoggles. Those countries had some money that the U.S. gave them, and they needed to spend it with us. So we went, and they really didn't care a whole hoot about the training. That we were supposed to be able to go back up there and see how they did from Panama. Probably one of the neatest things I did while I was in Panama was I had the opportunity to go to Paraguay, Ascension, Paraguay, and fly with the Paraguayan Air Force and train in counterinsurgency tactics. And they really were serious about it, although they never did have us come back to see how they were doing. The thrill of it to me was we had a team that went, and there was a C-47 pilot. I went as a Cessna 185 pilot. I had never seen a Cessna 185. But I was given a checklist and a tech order, and it was a long flight from Panama to Ascension, Paraguay, and they said, read up on it. And I did, and I got there, and I had two students. They were both lieutenants, and one of the guys' names was Cesar Kramer. Can you imagine, a Paraguayan? That's the German influence there.
Yeah.
And then the other guy was Jose Jimenez. And that ought to ring a bell if anybody listens to this interview, because we used to have a TV guy that was Jose Jimenez. Anyway, very nice young men, and the interesting thing to me was, of course, I was a captain, and the other officer was a major. So, and this is culture. It was important that they felt slighted, that they got a captain and the other people got a major. So we introduced ourselves, and then our question was, how much time do you have in this Cessna 185? And I said, I've never been in one, but we're going to learn how to fly it right quick.
Right.
And they said, well, what if you fly? And I said a U-10. Of course, they had no idea what that was. And then their next question was, have you been to Vietnam? And I said yes. And the major had not. So I was top dog. And of course, they asked some very touchy questions about how many people I'd killed and that sort of thing.
Right.
And that's just something that I don't know and I don't want to know. That was not my job. So, but anyway, it was really fun. We taught them to do message pickup, which you have a grappling hook on the line in the airplane, and they would set poles up with a thing across the message, and you'd fly by and grab that message off that, pull it in the airplane, and it says, help, I'm caught in the cheese factory or something. Right. Anyway, we taught, I doubt that they ever used it, but we did. The way I learned to fly the Cessna 185, I took the ranking student I had, the guy that had the most rank. I think they were both lieutenants. One may have been a captain. Anyway, he went up with me, and I did the things that I would do with starting out in flying a new airplane, do stalls and try some landings. And it went well.
Right.
We did, but we did short field takeoffs and landings both day and night, which they did not like at all. At night, of course, for runway lights, now we're doing this just in a grass field.
Okay.
We didn't use because their Air Force flies off the international airport.
Okay.
But we didn't do the training there. And at night we used, because we took some enlisted people, and they were training combat controllers, which are these are guys that'll jump out of an airplane, go set up an airfield for you on the ground, and mark it, and you come in, and so they had those people that were learning how to do that, holding flashlights as landing lights down the runway for us. Well, you can imagine what that runway looked like as we got closer and closer to the ground. Those flashlights were going everywhere. Yeah, these guys, they didn't like it. They did it because they knew if they didn't do it, they'd be in trouble. It's a lot. There was no quitting, and I was proud of them. They did it,
right.
Not liking it, and they spoke some English, but their English was a lot better than my Spanish because I don't speak any Spanish.
Right.
So only once did it cause a problem in the cockpit, and we got through that with no problems. But I often wonder what those guys are doing. One of them may be the president of the country. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, the big deal was that they were so proud of what they'd accomplished, and they ought to be, that they put on an air show for the president, President Stroessner, General. And this is the first time they'd ever put on, maybe in the last time, I don't know,
right,
that they'd ever put on an air show. But they used Piper Cubs and C-47s. They had 2 or 3 T-6s that they flew. And my guys in the Cessna 185. The other thing we did with Cessna 185 was we static line jumped paratroopers out of it. Because we did that with the U-10, also in Panama. We didn't do it in Vietnam. We did it in Panama. Of course, that's only 2 people. It's really small, but
right.
If you want to dump a couple of spies in somewhere, this little bitty airplane could do it for you. So that was part of the counterinsurgency, was to do this. Well, we rigged the airplane and got it all ready, and I said, well, who's going to be first? We're going. And of course, their pilots flew. I went as the jump master, and nobody would volunteer. These paratroopers, they wanted no part of it. So they came out with a torso, no arms and legs or head, but a wooden torso,
right,
and strapped a parachute on it and said, take that up and show us that it's safe. So we did that. And then we said, who's going to be first? And nobody would go. So Sergeant Higbee, George Higbee, was the head combat controller. And he said, I'm going. Well, he was quite a paratrooper. And we went up and he jumped out, static line, and in the field where they were training other paratroopers, he guided his parachute and came down and landed right on their platform. Well, very impressive.
Right.
And we got some guys to say, okay, we would go.
They saw they weren't going to die.
Yeah. And I don't know, they'd already jumped out. I mean, they jump out of a C-47.
Right.
I guess they thought it just wouldn't open their parachute, the static line, but they've got a cord they can also pull.
Right.
Anyway, we went up and things were going along well. And what they had to do was, they would get out the door and hold on to the strut and drop away. Well, one guy wouldn't let go, wouldn't drop away. Well, I can't get him back in the airplane, and I can't land with him standing there.
Right.
So I took my size 12 boot and just give him a nudge. And away he went. And lo and behold, his parachute opened. And
gave him a little bit of courage.
Yeah, yes. And they all cheered him because they saw the problem.
Right.
And of course, he didn't land real close to where everybody else was.
Right.
But anyway, and that was a very. The Paraguayan people were really nice, and having grown up in Kansas, it was almost like being back home, except they didn't speak English. And it's very much of a farming community and that sort of thing. We taught them low-level navigation. And, that was going to be a piece of cake. They thought they could just, we told them to draw up the maps and get all the things that you do with that, and we don't need to do. So I took my first pilot up, and we started out and took off, and I told him when I briefed him, I don't want you going any higher than 50 feet. Well, he's going up 100, 150. I said, no, 50 feet. Took the airplane, put him down 50 feet. Well, it didn't take long, they were completely lost.
Right.
Because they would get up high enough that they could see all the landmarks that they knew, and I knew that's what was going to happen,
Right.
but they wouldn't follow their map. Well, you can do the same. So anyway, they didn't like it, but it was a learning experience, and of course, once they did it, okay, that was all right. But again, my time in the commandos and things, and going around to different countries, because as I say, I was in Germany and Panama and Vietnam, is to learn the culture and try to get to know the people. So therefore you can understand some things. They threw a big party for us when we were getting ready to leave, big dinner, and one of the Air Force, I don't know what his rank was, but he took a C-47 and flew out to his ranch somewhere, hit a cow in the head or whatever, and threw it on board, brought it back, and butchered it right to, I mean, it was the freshest meat I've had. It was delicious.
Yeah.
And they barbecued like we do, and their charcoal may have been different, but so it's one of the things I forgot to say about Vietnam. There was a place called Ham Tan. It was out on the South China Sea, and which brought me to do this thing later in our detachment headquarters. A lot of the places we would land where there were some kind of an airstrip or something lined out that says this is where you land, there was something that you needed to know about it. Now, if it was a regular airfield, like going into Benoit or something, you could read about it because they had publications
Right.
about it. And anyway, you go into this place called Ham Tan on the South China Sea, and the runway was marked backwards. In other words, if you've landed east to west,
Okay.
but if you're going east, the runway should say 090. But it said 270. And coming back the other way, they had it just reversed.
Right.
Well, that's confusing. So those were things that you. So I set up a deal. I got pictures And if we didn't have a picture, the Army would go out and take a picture of the airfield from the air. We come back and I made a big map with strings coming out, and here's this landing thing, and here's a picture of it, and told you things like that.
Right.
Like at the Tay Ninh, where the Special Forces were. If you went into one of the Special Forces field, it was a PSP runway. Probably, I don't know when it was put in. You know what PSP is?
No.
Well, it's metal with holes in it.
Oh, okay.
Slicker than,
Okay.
if it's wet, it's just, but it's solid on the ground. And they had that, but you flew in over a cemetery. And you didn't want to get too low because some of those monuments were
Right.
pretty good size. So you had to be sure to come down. And that was the kind of thing we put there. There was one town, and I can't remember the name, but you landed on the main street. And you landed going one way, and you had to get stopped before you hit the fountain in front of the courthouse or whatever it was. And then to turn around, you taxied around that, came back, and then you took off going the other way. It doesn't make any difference what the wind was doing.
Right.
Because you couldn't get airborne without hitting that fountain or that building at the end of it taking off. But if you went the other way, if you couldn't get airborne yet, there was about a 250-foot drop right at the end of that, and then you could go down there and get to flying once you got the friction. So we'd write all these things up.
Man, I bet that was helpful to everybody.
Well, yeah, I mean, word of mouth we
Right.
told each other. But that was my idea. I came up with the guys they all pitched in and would say what they'd learned about, because somebody'd say, oh, I'm going and I haven't been there. Oh, well, you needed to know this. Well, we wrote it all up. But anyway.
That's handy. What's the soccer war?
Oh, I don't know. Let's ask one of the history majors here. Well, I was told when I was asked to, well, let's clear something up.
Okay.
When we were flying for the soccer war, we were actually supposed to be part of the Organization of American States organization. Now,
Right.
I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but it's like NATO, only
Okay.
it's South America.
In North America.
Yeah, and so that was what we were doing. We were to haul diplomats and things around. The war, and I don't know what the encyclopedia says, but the war we were told was over a soccer game in the World Cup, and El Salvador beat Honduras, and Honduras got mad about it. And they flew over into El Salvador and threw bombs out of a C-47. And the fight was on. I think, from some little research that I did, that if you look at a map, Honduras does not have a seaport on the Pacific Ocean.
Okay.
They do have a good coastline on the Atlantic. But El Salvador comes down and cuts them off, and then El Salvador comes and joins with Nicaragua with a little, and they have no, so that's my personal opinion, is why they started this, and that was a good way to do it, was over a soccer war.
Yeah.
Well, they realized this wasn't going to work, and I know there were people there from Argentina and lots of different other countries. But the real bad part about it all was that immediately upon this happening, the banditos on both sides found out this is a good way to loot and kill and rape and plunder. I saw some atrocities during that was worse than anything I saw in Vietnam. And it's sad.
Yeah.
But again, culture and knowing this, the hard part we had guys over in El Salvador and we had guys in Honduras, and we were the ones that could fly back and forth across the border. The airlines had to leave Tegucigalpa and fly around to get to Guatemala. They couldn't go, and vice versa. So we could haul the diplomats back and forth. which was what we were doing. But and then the diplomats would want to go out and look at places, and we would take our U-10 and land at the cow pasture or where, because there weren't airports in all these places. And if you came in and flew, and of course, being the good military pilot that I am, I flew a traffic pattern. Well, I didn't realize I was going the first time this happened. It only happened once because I briefed everybody, but I flew into El Salvador and back into Honduras in the traffic pattern because it was right on the border.
Right.
Both sides shot at me. As you went into one country, these banditos would shoot at you, and come back, the other guys would shoot at you. It was not, but I was there in like 30 days and got replaced, and then it was like it was over. I don't know how it was settled or what happened, but we didn't have people there, so we just. But I that's my claim to fame, that I fought in 2 wars.
And then, so when did you get out?
Well, I got out on December 31st, 1976. Put in 21 years per pay, 20 years and a half of duty. I went from Panama to South Dakota.
Okay.
Spent 5 years there in SAC. I'll give them a plug. It was all right. I mean, the Black Hills are wonderful, and there's things to do, and then my last duty assignment was here in Newark, Ohio, at the Newark Air Force Station. And I was the chief of admin and services for, I don't know. And then I had my 20 years in and didn't get promoted, and they asked me to retire. So that's like telling you you're going to retire.
I guess, yeah.
Because really, other than my time in Vietnam, and that's part of the deal. I mean, I knew that if there was war, you go.
Right.
I really enjoyed my military career. I feel I was fortunate. I liked to fly airplanes. That was a big plus. But I've got to see a lot of the world. Learned a lot about people. That as much as, and I've had lots of people ask me, well, you've been all these places, and where would you live? And I said, right here, United States, the best country in the world. As bad as some of our things are. But if I was forced to go somewhere, then I'd have to think about it. Seriously, I enjoyed lots of different countries. One I know I wouldn't live in is France, but other than that,
why is that? I mean,
it's the most unfriendly country I've ever been in. And why, I have no idea.
Right. Because you were there.
Well,
50s?
Yeah, late 50s, early 60s.
So you'd think they would have been friendly towards us then, but.
And that was one of the interesting things when I went to Germany. This was in 1958, so the war hadn't been over.
Right.
And there's lots of rubble and ruins still that had not been cleaned up. And of course, lots of people that knew about the war. And it was fun to talk with some of the people, and if they would talk about the war, and they'd say, "Oh, well, the Americans never bombed here; it was always the British," and you knew darn well that, but they really were trying to be diplomatic about it and nice about it. But of course, with a name like mine, I'm of German descent.
Right.
I like Germany. Excuse me. I went to Denmark. I really liked Denmark. I visited Sweden not for very long, and I liked that. Switzerland is nice, but there's this. And in South America, I mean, we lived in Panama, and my kids were, I don't know, I'd have to think, but they're small. They were just starting kindergarten, my daughter was, and the boy was in preschool. But we had a live-in maid, I had a yard boy, I had all these things, and it was nice living.
Right.
And people were, they were happy to have you, or appeared so.
Right. Did you fly any after the war? Have you had a chance to fly after you got out?
No, not really. It's expensive.
Yeah.
And I have a friend locally who chartered an airplane, and we flew to Michigan to go salmon fishing, and he told the pilot that I was a pilot, and he let me fly up and land the airplane, and that was fun.
Yeah.
And my daughter and her husband bought me 2 hours of flying at Heath International out here. And I went out and did that. Made takeoffs and landings. I mean, anybody can sit and fly, just bore holes through the sky, nothing to it.
Right.
It's the taking off and the landing. I have a thing on my desk at home that says, the second thrill to man is flying, the first thrill is landing. Which is kind of true.
Probably.
But I did that, and I took my wife with me on one of those flights because she'd never flown with me. She was an airline stewardess, so she knows about flying. That was really a plus in our family when we were first married. And my daughter lives in Alaska and has for years. She had a neighbor that had a Cessna 185, but it had a turboprop and float plane. And when I go up there to visit her, I get to fly with him, and that was been a lot of fun. So I got to make a float plane landing and take off. I've done that. Something I always wanted to do. I always wanted to land on an aircraft carrier, but only once. I didn't ever want to be in the Navy. I just want to say I did it, and I haven't. And when I was at Hamilton Air Force Base, flying the 123, I always wanted to fly under the Golden Gate Bridge. But I knew that would end my career, so I didn't do that. And right now, if I'd had a little light airplane and nobody knew it, I flew Longaberger's basket out here. Handle, that would be fun to go through. And somebody probably's done that, but
I haven't heard of it, but like
I'm sure somebody's had it. I mean, I'm not the only crazy pilot in the world. No, I enjoy my career. I haven't had a chance to fly, and I think I'm fortunate that I got stationed here. In my whole 21 years in the military, I owned one home, and I was in Vietnam. While I owned that, my family lived there, and so when we came here, there's no quarters or anything, so we had to buy a house, and it turned out well. Our kids liked it here, and so they both graduated from Newark High, and both graduated from Bowling Green. So we've stayed, even though I might not have wanted to.
Right.
I'm a Jayhawk, Dan. Tried and true, and I'd love to go back to Lawrence.
You?
Yeah. But hadn't worked out. My wife's from Lawrence, for God's sake.
Right.
I mean, why she doesn't want to go, I don't know. But anyway, it's
Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to bring up?
I'm sure. I mean, you got the
we got your newspaper
your questions
and your biography, and we're going to put with it.
I think one thing I want to say.
Okay.
Just to put it in there. My son spent 20 years in the Air Force. My daughter-in-law spent 20 years in the Air Force. Her father spent 27 years in the Air Force. So, and as I said, my brother was in the Army during the Korean War. So I think our family has served our country.
Yes.
And but I'm proud of my son and his wife, and of course, my daughter-in-law's father since passed away. But it was, we really had we were never stationed together or anything, but we could talk the language and this sort of thing. So
that's neat.
But the military is not. It's like anything. It's what you make of it. You can. You probably don't want this on, but when I was in South Dakota, and that's out in the middle of the prairie, but it's 20 miles to the Black Hills, and great camping, great trout fishing, there's great skiing. I'm not a skier, but I ski. You can go tobogganing. And we had people complain about, oh, nothing to do, da. We had an Olympic swimming pool. We had track and field. We had soccer fields. We had basket. We had, I don't know how many gymnasiums that they could go and play. Nothing to do. It's
Right.
what you make of it. There was plenty to do. You could board a horse right on the base. Of course, that's a lot of work.
Right.
But
Still.
if you wanted, there's those things you could do. And they wouldn't do. And it's almost everywhere I was, except like Vietnam. Even in Vietnam, there were things you could do, as you asked me.
Right.
Mainly work. But that's okay. That was what it was all about.
Right.
And I but it has to be. I would say that people who can't make it in the military can't make it anywhere else. So, and my last statement is,
Okay.
I'm a firm believer in military service of 2 years for everybody, whether you're sick, lame, lazy, or what. 2 years. It'll make a man or a mouse out of you.
Okay. Well, thanks for this time. I appreciate it.